Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and this week we are finally starting to tackle the interior trim of the Alfarrari. Alright guys, welcome back, and those of you who were watching last week will have seen that I did a bunch of little bits and pieces in the interior again. There was wiring up the electronic fuel pump, water pump, sorry, and fan controller, and doing the bonnet window and a bunch of things like that. If you missed it, I'll put a link up above so you can catch up, and please, like always, think about subscribing, hit that like button, and click the bell. It does definitely help the channel out. Couple of questions that kept popping up from last week, saying a lot of people were wondering why the ECU didn't have enough outputs. It's not the ECU's issue, it's this engine's issue. For starters, like the ECU has 10 outputs this particular one that I'm using, and I'm sure there's possibly ways to do more with CAN, which I haven't talked to the guys at Link about. But the Link is more than capable of handling everything. It's just more the way that I set things up. For starters, this engine requires a lot more because it has twin throttle bodies. There's 4 outputs straight away. So there's 4 outputs for that. You've got fuel pump, the VVT, the solenoids. I've grouped them both together as ones for the inlet valves. So there's a bunch of them straight away. And then I've got, I'm using a bunch of the outputs. I'm going to be using them for the gauges on the dash to get them to work, which I can potentially intercept and send some of the signals straight to the gauge and sort of tee it off from the gauge and go to the ECU rather than sending it to the ECU first and then output to the gauge. Things like water temperature, which obviously goes straight into the ECU. The ECU needs that, but I can potentially bypass it. I just have to look into those sort of things. And I want an engine check light. So if I get a warning on the ECU, it's going to light up the check engine light. So there's a bunch of things, and I do have enough outputs, but it was just easier using the separate controller, which does everything. It's already programmed to do what it needs to do. So the controller can do its thing. The engine will still get engine temperature and all the rest of it. That side of it can be run by that, and I don't have to worry about setting that all up. Another thing to set up in the ECU. The other comment that came through quite a bit was about my bonnet window. A lot of people were expecting me to have the bonnet window flush with the bonnet. The only way to have it completely flush would either be to route out a piece of perspex and place it in the bonnet, but then it would have to be so ridiculously thick to fit in there to actually have enough meat around the edge to route it out and join it. It'd just be this massive chunk of perspex in there, which is not what I was looking at anyway. Or I would have to have a flange that would underneath the edge of it that would be visible all the way around to hold it in. It's just not the way I planned it. I'm quite happy with the way that it sits into the recess, and I think it'll do the job quite nicely. So I'm not concerned about that at all. I think that's exactly the way I planned it, and that's the way it is. But moving on to the fun stuff. Finally, after all of this time and playing around with the interior bits, it's time to tackle the carpet, which means that I can actually start revealing the color choices for the interior. Okay, so time to reveal my thoughts on the interior trim. My color selection always seems to be somewhat controversial, and that's fine because I'm building the car that I want and I like to drive. And with the yellow exterior, obviously I was limited with colors that would really work in this car. And the big issue is that most yellow Ferraris are ordered with a black interior. And I find black to be the most dull, boring interior you can get. I love a nice plush interior in a car, and black is just mundane. On a daily driver, it's hard wearing and whatever, but definitely would not go with white because I can't be trusted with anything white. So really, I love a tan interior in a Ferrari, but the tan, the regular tan would be far too light and would clash with the yellow, would not work in this car. So I was searching around quite a bit trying to work out the exact colours to go to work with this car. And I will show you what I came up with. So I did some extensive research on Ferrari colours, particularly I wanted the Ferrari interior colour to match the Ferrari exterior colour, and the colour I came up with is called Cuoio. Cuoio? I tried to research the Italian pronunciation. It's Q-U-O-I-O. Cuoio. The Italians will definitely correct my pronunciation, but this is the leather colour. So it is not a tan. It is like more of a mid-brown colour. This is actual Ferrari leather. So if you're going to get your Ferrari retrimmed or whatever, this is the quality and sort of colour supply match to the Ferrari. It's very nice, very expensive Ferrari leather. I think it's beautiful. I think it'll be a really nice interior. It goes well. It doesn't clash with the yellow, I don't think. I think it works quite well. The light tan would not work, but this I think is really nice. So I'm going to be a mix of this Cuoio leather and this beautiful black or charcoal Ferrari leather for the top of the dash. Having a light coloured top of the dash causes a lot of reflection, and you end up sort of getting blinded by the reflection in the windscreen. It's much nicer to have a dark top of the dash, and there'll be some hints in there to go with this. And that brings me to the carpet that I'm going to be using, and I wanted something to match the Cuoio leather, and I went with a very high-end Mercedes carpet. It's actually even more expensive than the leather, which is a beautiful sort of matching carpet to the leather. I think it'll be a beautiful touch and be a very, very nice, neat, timeless interior. Some of you might hate it, but you can always, when you build your own Alfarrari, you can paint it red with a black interior. But this is the one I'm choosing, and I am very, very happy with the selection. All right, last week I ordered the gasket for my pedals, and as many have mentioned, and actually Jeff Karuna from Racing Junior, who's been restoring on his YouTube channel an old Alfa 105, mentioned as well, getting this gasket on, you can no longer, I don't know whether they made them differently originally or what, but you can't actually get this gasket over the top of these pedals like they are. The rubber just does not stretch that far. And what a lot of people will do, and what Jeff did, is actually cut the pedals off and made a tab and bolted them back on again, so you can actually get the gasket over the top. I think for me, what I'm probably going to do, I'm just going to cut them off, put the gasket on, and then weld it back on again, because I won't need to remove it again. This gasket will last long enough, and it'll be somebody else's problem to do the same thing that I would have done when we get to it. So let's start cutting, put the gasket on, weld it in, and we should be ready to put them back in the car for the last time. And we have the gasket on. Hopefully I put it on the right way around. And we have the pedals welded back on again, and they're all painted up and looking nice and solid. So that is one of the steps out of the way. As I said, I could have welded them on and made them bolt on and off, but it's completely fine. It didn't obviously affect the rubber because I didn't heat it up that much. But they're nice solid pedals on. And I bought myself brand new rubbers from Classic Alfa. So we'll get the pedal covers on and put these back in, and then we can start looking at the carpet.
So now the pedals have been refitted, we can glue down the sound deadening on the floor once and for all. So now I'm marking out a rough size for my driver's side carpet and attempt to fit that to the car. I very soon realised that was going to be too difficult, so I actually used some of Car Builder's templating plastic, which is fantastic for doing this sort of stuff because it holds the shape nicely, but you can see through it, so you can see where you want to mark everything out and cut out your shape as needed.
Alright, so I actually used a bunch of this templating plastic that I got from Car Builders to lay out the shape of the driver's side floor carpet. So I've got the basic shape here ready to go. So now I'm going to take that out and transfer it over onto my carpet.
So you can see here I'm just marking out the shape onto the carpet and then cutting it out, leaving myself a bunch of leeway around the edge just in case my shape was not the best. And in the end, I think I worked out that I should really trust my templates more because I just ended up spending so much more time going back and trimming a little bit at a time so that I don't wreck an expensive piece of carpet, but it did take quite a while to get it all fitted nicely without wasting anything. And here you can see I refit my center console and I'm just trimming the edges just to make sure it's a perfect fit now with the thickness of the carpet in place.
Alright, so I've spent quite some time now going through with my pattern, getting the carpet in to a rough shape. And when I say rough shape, it's still got a fair bit of finesse work to go. Now, I deliberately, when I made these panels, I knew I was going to need to trim them, but that's not an issue. So as I'm going, I'm sort of laying them in, trimming them off so that I get a really nice fit for the center console panels so that the carpet sits nicely. But you can see that it's going to be very nice. Once this is all trimmed in the leather, it should look beautiful. One thing that I've noted with this carpet, which is a good thing, is once I actually trim it, it doesn't actually like flake back and keep peeling off. It just sort of stops where once you get rid of the initial sort of fluffy bits, it doesn't keep peeling off. So I'm not going to go around the edge of the whole thing and bind it all. The bits you don't see are going to stay unseen. And my plan is for example, for things like this where this crosses over, this is where I'm going to start trimming it. I want to make it so it's a nice tight fit, trim it so that these edges butt up together, and when I glue it in, it should be a nice, neat, finished fitment that doesn't actually need to have a binding edge all the way up here, because I don't really want to see the binding. I just want a nice, neat fitting carpet. Of course, there will be a floor mat and stuff like that to come, but for the time being, that is looking really good.
So the reinforcing bar in the back floor of the car needs a separate piece of carpet because it won't stretch that far, but I'm spending the time to make it almost seamless, the join between that and the rest of the carpet. And then here you can see there's another piece I'm cutting out with my template paper for the vertical section, cutting out a new piece, and I'll glue that on separately, again spending the time to make it almost seamless.
Alright, so I pulled the carpet out of the car and I've been thinking about the best way to sort of finish off where these pedals are, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a nice edge binding around that in the leather. So the way I'm going to do it, I've got a scrap bit of material that I'm just going to sort of roughly measure how far around the hole I need, and then I'm going to cut out some strips and I'll show you how I sew them together to make a nice little trim around the edge of these holes.
So you can see here I'm sewing one of the first bits of edge strip around one of the pedal holes, and you can see how difficult it is trying to work with the entire bit of carpet and do a 360-degree circle. It's quite difficult, but I got there in the end.
All right, so I finished the first little loop around the pedal where I've just edged it out. That will look reasonably neat. It's not perfect, but it's me. I'm not a trimmer, but I'll give it a go. So the way I do it is I've cut out a 30mm wide strip of the leather and then drawn a line on it at 6mm all the way around. And having it upside down on the face of the carpet, I lay it on and then sew it around with the wide bit away from the edge, so then I can fold it underneath and then sew it again around the edge. So you're sewing, so then on the back it ends up sewing it around and locking it into place and trimming it out as I go. So that's one. Let's do the other one, and then we can put this carpet in the car, glue it in, and it should be there for good.
So again, I'm struggling with the size of the carpet to sew all around the edge, but now it's sewn in, I tuck it in, and then I go around and do some relief cuts on the back edge before going around and sewing it again to lock the back in. Refitting it is slightly difficult getting it over the pedals, but now I can glue it in for good. And then just trim out the seat mount holes to make sure I can get my seats back in.
All right, so I am really quite happy with that. It's looking really neat. Most of this is obviously going to be covered by the seat, so you're not really going to see a lot of it, but the footwell is looking really nice, sort of nice and neat and clean. If I can move some of the wires out of the way. Yeah, trimmed around the pedals neatly, and I think it's just going to be a nice neat carpet. And then I'll have a floor mat there, and the box for the master cylinders, that's all going to be trimmed in leather, so that should look nice as well. So now it's time to go over to the passenger side.
And the passenger side is a repeat of the driver's side, but a little bit easier with a few less things to deal with. And I reused the driver's side template and just adjusted it to suit. I still didn't learn to trust my template though, so it still took me a long time to get it all fitted nicely. A small glimpse here of how long it takes to just cut and trim and make all the little tiny pieces so that it all fits beautifully, but hopefully it's a nice seamless finish in the end. Now it's all correct, I can glue it down for good.
All right, these are looking fantastic. I am very happy with that. You can see there's a few wrinkles here, which is actually behind where the seat goes. The seat's mounted and covers that completely. I'm not overly concerned about that. It looks reasonably neat now where the pedals come through with that trim around the edge, and the whole thing is looking really nice and neat and tidy. So I have the floor at least of the carpets all in. That looks so good. I really love the colour. I love the lighter colour interior. It's exactly what I was looking for. But that is all the time I have this week, so I think that means it's time for Fun Facts with Mrs. Jeff.
Hey guys, Formula One in 1996 saw a struggling Ferrari introduce a brand new car with the F310. To pilot the car, Ferrari signed the reigning two-time world champion Michael Schumacher away from Benetton. The F310 was named for the new engine Ferrari had developed in the 3-litre V10, arguably the best-selling era of Formula One. The F310 was designed originally with a low nose, but this was scrapped mid-season for the more aerodynamically efficient high nose. It was plagued with unreliability, with Eddie Irvine having 8 consecutive retirements, mainly due to mechanical issues. Years later, he referred to the car as a piece of junk and almost undrivable. Despite the car's unreliability, Michael Schumacher still managed to win 3 races in the season. A lot of the reliability issues were ironed out in the 1997 season, and Michael Schumacher was neck and neck with Jacques Villeneuve in the hunt for the championship that year. It came down to the last race this season where Michael Schumacher could not hold off Jacques Villeneuve, who was storming up behind him. Schumacher deliberately rammed into him. Schumacher ended up in the gravel and was disqualified for the entire season, and Jacques Villeneuve ended up the 1997 world champion.
All right, I've been looking forward to this. I'm really enjoying tackling the interior. I really enjoy the sewing and the creation part of it. So I'm looking
I love it
forward
when
to
you're at home and like I'm working and I can hear you sewing. It's kind of soothing.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I'm looking forward to next week because I think next week we're going to start tackling the seats, which is
More sewing.
yes, lots and lots more sewing.
Yeah.
I'm slightly nervous because it's very expensive leather and stuff, but yeah, I think it's. I'm really looking forward to seeing how they come out. So
I think we need to bring it back to a stitch in time saves 9, or what's it? The one about measure twice, cut once. So
I think all these things
many
are
of these
gonna-
little sayings that are so pertinent at the moment.
I think they're all going to be pertinent next week.
It's going to take your time.
Hopefully you guys join us for that, and yes, and we'll continue the progress on the Alfa in the next one.
That's the sewing gesture. No, cutting gesture. Cheers, gosh. Like, subscribe. Take care, everybody.
See you guys.
Goodbye. The new car, Ferrari signed the reigning two-time championship Michael Schumacher. Michael Schumacher, the new engine Ferrari had developed in the 3-litre V10. The F310 was named for the